Dean of the Los Angeles Visionary Association. Monthly, end of the month, Sunday Salon at Clifton's Cafeteria. I'm so glad everyone is here. We've got a lot going on. There is a walking tour which is chock full. No one, if you're not already signed up, it's too late. But I say but because before we leave at 2:15, Nathan, wave your hand, Nathan. Nathan's going to give I think we're going to get started a little before 2. Nathan's going to give a talk from about 5 to 2 to 2:15 about this walking tour, which unfortunately is just chock full. But it's going to be interesting. Even if you can't go on the tour, I think you might tell us.
Well, this is assuming that all the people who are signed up are going to show up.
That's right. There may be some notions. So anyway, Nathan, tell us what you're going to talk about here before you go on your walking tour. You're going to talk about.
As well, where does one start? As many of you may know, Kim and I worked on, the year Los Angeles in 1947 for some time, and at about the same time, a company called Rockstar Team Bondi, in conjunction, they started a video game, which came out about a week ago or two, and changed, called L.A. Noire, set in Los Angeles in 1947, and so I ran out and I bought it because I'm a freak in that regard, and have done nothing, as you can see, for the last 2 weeks, but play it and have been a psycho and am obsessed with how it represents, how well it represents, how it misrepresents, how it re-represents, to point of phrase, our city, and where in the historiography of Los Angeles, we can enter it into the canon and in what regard, and so vital. So there you go. That's what I'll be talking about. I'm going to show a little bit of the game, and then we're going to go take a walk, and I'm going to point at stuff and say.
You're going to play the game here while we're still here. Okay. So even if you're not on the walking tour, maybe if you're someplace, you can stick around and take a peek.
You can see how they rendered it and so forth, or rasterized it.
That's right. Perfect. And that's at the very end. The second to last then, Rich Polysorbate, and his friends are here. Rich, you have a lot to talk about the shipwreck off of Palos Verdes, the Dominator. Yeah. Okay. And we'll get to that. Give us 30 seconds on what you're going to talk about. This is a big part of your emotional half acre, isn't it?
My half acre.
Your emotional half acre. Yeah.
What? Hi, I'm Rich. I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Dominator. When I was a kid, that was my backyard playground. I liked climbing aboard rusted metal things that came out of the ocean. And it infected me, gave me tetanus of the mind, and I started getting really weird dreams. And how many of you have had dreams where you just keep going to the same place? So it's common.
It's called the return of impressions. Victoria and I are going to talk about that.
So that's what I'm going to do. And with us today we have I want to thank the PMA, Pacific Maritime Association, for leasing me Captain Dobrin and Mr. Paul Wilkins, who will be making some nice Greek music because it was a Greek freighter that got dredged up on the rocks. And in my introduction, I'll share some interesting something with boom, right in the Dream Journal. There's pamphlets here, if you want. Those are free. Got soap screens, got cassette tapes. So you can hear the Dominator all the time.
Fantastic. Thank you. And we'll be getting to that around 1:15. We got a lot to do. Okay. I'm gonna get hello. So how many people are here for the first time? Oh, I never asked this. This is a lot of fun. All right, it's a lot of fun. 6, 7 hands. Good. Very good. We are here at Clifton's Cafeteria. This salon exists entirely due to the good graces of the management of Clifton's Cafeteria, for which we're eternally grateful. A young man named Andrew Marin has just taken over the master lease of Clifton's Cafeteria. This cafeteria has been here since 1935. Nathan and I are going to talk about the history of Clifton's Cafeteria downtown. Clifford Clinton opened this cafeteria in 1835, and just 8 months ago, I think, the Clinton family gave a master lease to Andrew Marin of the Edison Bar for Clifton's Cafeteria, the LLC, and they gave him a master lease on this building. The Clinton family owns this building. The Bose brothers built this building as a cafeteria in 1913, 1914. So close enough. This room, it is rumored, though I have yet to see genuine proof from Andrew Marin, the owner, and I've certainly heard from other people, and Sven, maybe you can work on this. This room that we're in is rumored to originally have been, yes, a tiki-themed room. This plays into the fact that the original Clifton's Cafeteria downtown, which Nathan and I will be discussing on the tour, is the Southeast Seas theme. This room, as you see it, was turned into the oldie-timey room in the 60s. The Clinton family wanted to harken back to the days when they took this building over from the Bose brothers and opened their cafeteria. Of course, downstairs, the Brookdale theme is famous. Clifford Clinton, who was a teetotaling, evangelical, sweetest guy in the world. His grandchildren noted he seemed actually kind of bitter when they went to Disneyland on opening day, and he was heard muttering, "Walt stole it from me." He was just the sweetest, and it was noted that he actually was a little, anyway. This is a great restaurant. We're so happy to be here in this space. Andrews plans to put this building on the National Register. You can see a lot of construction. There's a lot of great stuff happening here. We're just so happy that the Clintons have given this over to Andrew, and he's just taken the lead and is doing really great. Yes, Kim?
The window?
The windows. These windows have never, up until about 2 months ago, never seen Broadway for about 50 years. They put this awful screen up in the early 60s.
1963.
Thank you, Nathan. So Andrew is going to restore the facade to the original. And again, Nathan will talk about this in the section that takes place here from about 5 to 2 to 2:15. So we'll talk about Clifton's history a lot. All right, I'm going to stop talking about general stuff. Thank you so much for coming. We're going to have a lot of fun. I have the honor of being joined by my good friend Victoria.
My good friend Richard.
And we're going to talk about the United Lodge of Theosophy. The United Lodge of Theosophy has its offices in Los Angeles at Grand and 33rd, just a little to the south of here. And we're going to sit down and talk about it.
Or stand up.
Or stand. Yeah. Now, how does your voice feel? Let me get the microphone. We have a microphone.
I might cough, but because I have a cough. But I want everybody to be able to hear me, and the way
I think you need to turn the
we
volume up.
operate, I hope, is always my questions.
Okay. Well, let's see. Is this good? Do people like this? Okay. We'll work with the microphone. Perfect.
That's right.
Okay. Do you want to pass out some?
I just want to say I have handouts.
Yeah. Why don't we get those out
Put
to
them
the
on the
people?
table, but I need to start out. Can you hear me? I need to start out with one really important thing. The United Lodge of Theosophy doesn't proselytize. I'm not here to sell you a doctrine or a religion. That's really important. What I'm here to talk about is a funny fact about Los Angeles history.
Yes.
Richard and I were talking about the return of impressions. And
You should talk. I'll pass these out.
And let me know if you can't hear me. Clifton's Cafeteria in the 1930s and 1940s, every Thursday lunchtime. It may have been in this room, my friends, I have no idea. There were a number of lawyers who were students of theosophy in the downtown area who came here and held open classrooms right in this building to have a lot of fun. And theosophy is seen in a lot of different ways, but one of the folks I just met a few minutes ago said, well, what is it? Real basic stuff. All through history, there have been folks who've been interested in what we might call the inner workings of everything. How does it work? The physical world, the intellectual world, the spiritual world. Religion and science are part of that. We're all as humans part of it. Down the ages, organizations tend to take over, and so you get organized religion, organized science, and there are always those people who rebel. In the 1870s, a woman named H.P. Blavatsky came from Russia to America, tried to say to spiritualists who thought they received their dead grandfathers, you see something, it's real, it's not your grandfather. And from that started working with people and teaching, and many intellectuals of the day who were what we might call now rabble-rousers, were drawn to her work. Did they stay with it? Doesn't matter. They were interested in new ideas and very, very different ways of looking at the world. After her death, things changed. They got much more ritualistic, much more religious. The rabble-rousers got tired of that. And a man named Robert Crosbie came to California to work with some theosophists who were here at a place called Point Loma. And many of you who are historians will know that the Point Loma effort, very building-oriented, did a lot of plays, had a school. He got tired of that. He came to Los Angeles, worked for the LA Times, and in a number of small locations in downtown started having study classes. And all he wanted to do was study the original teachings of theosophy. Didn't want to put on plays, didn't want to have dances, didn't want to have potlucks. Just said, let's not deal with organization, let's not get involved with money, let's simply meet and talk. So from 1909, when we formally organized ourselves into what we call a non-organization, that's all the United Lodge of Theosophy has done. Now, in 1927, we had a building built for ourselves at the corner of Grand and 33rd. It is still there, and we still operate on this principle. 3 basic ideas. All life is one. It expresses itself rhythmically, day, night, birth, death, and so on. And as humans, we have the potential in us to become aware of that identity and then become active workers for what we might call the welfare of the whole. That aside, our building is open 5 days a week. If you want to come and see a great historic structure, you are always welcome. All of our classes are totally free. We never get involved with money. And what we do is what I have said. So what did they do at Clifton's? They did just what I have outlined. Sat down, talked about these ideas. So one of the things about downtown Los Angeles that I think is fascinating is that there you get this wonderful, call it atmosphere. We would call it an electromagnetic aroma, so to say, that's been influenced over the years by all of this richness. And now, when you walk downtown, you see the tremendous diversity of Los Angeles. I can only imagine that my grandfather, who began studying theosophy in his late teens, after a number of really serious family tragedies led him to question his own religious upbringing, would have been, on the one hand, shocked, but on the other hand, delighted to see what's happened in LA. This enormous international coming together, this global perspective, all the tremendous suffering that you see, all the poverty, all the illness, and yet also the intellectual richness. And along that line, I think it's great that everybody is here for Lava, and I'm delighted to know that you guys are doing it.
Perfect. So why don't we talked about what we were going to do, and we can't do everything at once, tragically. I know, it's the great conundrum. But we sat down and we talked about what we talked about, and we thought we would go back to Crosbie, and Crosbie making the decision back in the early teens, 19 teens in Los Angeles, what forces were acting on him. He came out of Point Loma.
Robert Crosbie was a Canadian who lived in Boston, where he met a man named William Q. Judge. William Q. Judge was born in Ireland, brought to this country at 9 or 10, became a lawyer, traveled all over North and South America for his law firm, and also organizing for theosophical work. After Madame Blavatsky's death, none of you will be shocked at this, there was a split in the Theosophical Society. The English and European Theosophists tended to follow Annie Besant, whose organization, the Theosophical Society, is still alive and well and does good work. The Americans tended to follow the Judge line, which was a study Blavatsky, don't get involved with other versions of theosophy. Most people know about the Theosophical Society and its work. They don't always know about this American pro-Blavatsky, keep it simple, keep it the original teachings line that the United Lodge of Theosophy represents. Some of the gentlemen over here who are very knowledgeable about theosophical work in Altadena. The Altadena branch is again a judge branch. Unlike the United Lodge, they have a much more hierarchical structure. People always ask how we work, and this gets back to Crosbie. In a series of small meetings all through Los Angeles, what he saw was no matter how well-meaning people are, the need to organize, to dominate, and to get worried about bylaws, constitution, and officers, and money takes over. And all of us who are volunteers in organizations know that with the best intentions in the world, you get involved with something, and then a year later we're squabbling about who's going to be vice president, and why can't I organize the library, and the original heart and soul goes away. Oh, I see some smiles out here. We've all had this happen. So Robert Crosbie, this is our monthly pamphlet. Little quote on the front, schedule on the inside, and on the back, something called the United Lodge of Theosophy Declaration. And all it says, I will not read it to you, but all it says, my friends, is all we do is study theosophy. That we have no interest in constitution, bylaws, or officers. The sole bond between us is that study. Now, over 100 years, we've seen that it doesn't always work. People will show up and say, where's the boss? There isn't any. They just, to use a modern word, free. Or they'll say, I'm going to have my teaching here. And we say, sorry, hire your own hall. All we do here is one thing. They'll want to get involved with money. They'll want to start having other books printed. It's very simple, and all you do is one thing. It also can be either very attractive to people or very unattractive, and that's as it should be. Because one of the main ideas of theosophy is that we're all together in this great path of knowledge. So there is no higher source, there is no lower source, there's only the journey working together. So, yes, you may, please.
I'm gonna bring it back to say 1915. So it's 1915. The Los Angeles Times building was bombed 5 years earlier. There's the Crotona colony has been established by the Theosophy Society, which is a Besant, which is the group that followed Annie Besant. They established a colony on a hilltop in Hollywood, and they were getting ready to leave it soon, and they would move up to Ojai, where they are today. Robert Crosbie came out of Point Loma in San Diego, which...
When Robert Crosbie came out of Point Loma, what he did was to have these small meetings with a number of other kind of disenfranchised, disassociated students. And that's when he saw human nature take over. So he took his couple steps back and came up with this way of work, which is non-organized, and opened up. You can go walk by right now. 5th and Broadway, the Metropolitan Building? 3rd Broadway. They had rooms there that were opened up in 1917. And the first meeting that was held there was on May 8th, which is the Memorial Day for Blavatsky's death. We don't pay any attention to birthdays. We just look at death days because that's when you know what the person actually achieved in their life. So from 1970 to 1910, we met at the Metropolitan Building. And lots of people went. Because we never charge any money, imagine what that meant to people who were struggling here. Certainly during the Depression, our hall was filled. Imagine, no television, movies just getting going, and going to lectures was very, very popular, as most of you know. So a lot of people came and heard really marvelous speeches. And that, again, was one of Crosbie's gifts, was keep it simple, focus on what you're going to be interested in, and let the rest go. We have admired his work, want to say that he was way, way ahead of his time in terms of understanding human nature, and tried to come up with a non-structured method by which people could simply be interested in what they wanted to do. We operate very parallel to AA, and there are certain links between the people that started AA and the Theosophical movement that are very interesting historically.
Let me interrupt you again. The United Lodge of Theosophy, building at 33rd Grand, is still there. The Bhagavad Gita class, as of all your classes, have been going on there.
Yeah, Richard's trying to bring me back to what we actually do. And what we actually do is the same. It's really funny. We have records of what we did 100 years ago, and I'm always amazed that it's just what we do now. And kind of like I hate to say it, the Groundhog Day, a repetitive movie idea, but I'd like to think that if Robert Crosbie walked into the building, we would be too startled by the content of the class. Our Bhagavad Gita class, which means Wednesday afternoon from 1 to 2:15, has been going on for 80 years. Sometimes we sit and look around and think of all the folks that have come and gone through that class. And I'd like to think that for 80 years it's been one continuous discussion. Our Sunday night lecture is in a little different format than it was maybe 100 years ago, but the topics tend to be pretty much the same. I really don't know what more to say about it, except this is an unusual way to work. It's, I think, a fascinating way to work because it cuts across time, it cuts across personality, and allows us, and I think it would work in anything that you want to do, where you simply focus on what it is that you're interested in, not on all the accompanying things.
So let me interrupt you again. We're going to get right back to that.
Okay.
That's exactly where I want you to be when I want to wrap up our initial Los Angeles 1950. And you don't have to have any response to what I'm going to say. Because as you know, you're not here to talk about the Theosophy Society, you're not here to talk about any dissent, you're here to talk about the United Lodge of Theosophy. But I just want to wrap up our initial 1950. Los Angeles, I think, is in this really interesting period. Point Loma was started by Catherine Tingley. Crosbie came out of Point Loma very frustrated with organizations where people had to be in charge. Point Loma doesn't exist anymore. Crotona was founded as a colony for the Theosophical Society, an American branch that followed Blavatsky. They left the Hollywood colony in the early 1920s, moved to Ojai, they're still there. The ULT is still here. Between 1915 and 1923, approximately, Los Angeles saw some really interesting upheavals socially, politically, and a lot of people found that political solutions had failed. Social movements had failed, and that one needed to try totally different things to get to the next step. And I want to leave it with that. But a lot of really interesting stuff happened in Los Angeles that the United Lodge of Theosophy was a part of, that the Times bombing was a part of, that all these sort of struggles between the world of the finite world, the world where resources are limited and people that allocate the resources have all the power, and the world of the infinite, where our souls live. This is interesting. We're going to leave it, and maybe you have something to say. What? Okay.
Richard, that's really fascinating. And I look forward to it. Well, and a reminder, however, that the temporal world is always with us. And in the 1920s, the United States government said to what we would call now nonprofits, if you want to not pay taxes, you have to actually organize yourself differently. So we then separated. We have something called the Theosophy Company, which is a 501c3 nonprofit, owns the building, manages the money, prints the books, because we do have to function in the real world. This allows the United Lodge of Theosophists to operate in the way that I have described. It is good to remember that you need both ways of functioning. It's fun to hang out at Clifton's if somebody had to build a building and live in it.
And the building's been there.
Exactly. The building has been there. We've kept it going. People obviously care enough about it to make sure that happens. And also now, because this is Los Angeles in 2011, we operate with parallel Spanish and English classes. Our Spanish effort is really critical to our still being there. We also are translating and publishing all the books that were originally written in English into Spanish, so they're available. And again, this, I think, ties in with the need to recognize the reality of the history of Los Angeles.
Let's stay with books for a second. We're going to get to the canon. We're going to get to the point of the ULT in a minute. But let's talk about Cunningham Press. Right? You like that, right? So I'm fully surprised. So the United Lodge of Theosophy exists to publish canonical texts. And, well, the Theosophy Company. The Theosophy Company that owns the building and prints the books exists to publish canonical texts. We'll talk about those in a minute. Talk about the Cunningham Press, though. So when the Theosophy Company went forward, there was a need to publish books, and I love publishing books. I love the world of small publishers in Los Angeles. So let's talk about the Cunningham Press.
History. A gentleman named Henry Geiger, born and raised in New York City, came to Los Angeles in the 30s to work for the Theosophy Company, and Mark was doing Theosophy. In 1948, started Cunningham Press, which was one of the first, there are many of them now, one of the first publishers of fine art books. Didn't want it for wonderful printing. He was a born printer. And Cunningham Press history is itself fascinating. It's not connected directly with the Theosophical work, except that Henry Geiger published basically by himself, but with many, many marvelous intellectual collaborators, a weekly magazine called Manus. Manus is, as you must know, the Sanskrit word for mind. And Manus appeared from 1948 to 1986, which in itself is an extraordinary feat. It tackled all of the extraordinary issues of its day, and was far ahead of his time. Abraham Maslow, Paul Goodman, many people whose names you would know were contributors and supporters of Manus. You can go online, all of Manus is available to you. It very rarely mentioned the word theosophy, but it was an effort to wake up people to understand that human change only takes place when people become engaged, and it was really quite wonderful. And Cunningham Press was partly started to keep Manus going.
Perfect. And so perhaps, I want to leave time for questions, but perhaps you could just end on the notion, the United Lodge of Theosophy came out of a challenge that people were publishing documents that the United Lodge of Theosophy...
I don't know if there's anybody in the room who has a theosophical background, but after Blavatsky died, her work went out of print or was heavily, heavily altered by the people that were involved in the Theosophical Society. Most people know about if they know anything about theosophy, know about Krishnamurti, about his being found as a child, being anointed as the world Messiah. Blavatsky would have, to be blunt, turned over in her grave, freaked out in the astral, or whatever one thinks happens after death, about that episode of theosophical history. In 1923, and I must say that our work is always done anonymously. I've allowed Richard to introduce me because I'm happy dealing with you in this way, but we do not use names, ever. We never say, Victoria is going to speak Sunday night. We try to stay away from that, because once a name gets linked to a word, then, oh God, I can't stand her, I won't go. Or, God, she's wonderful, I can't wait to hear what she has to say. And that's not at all the point of this work. So in 1923, anonymously, a book called The Theosophical Movement was published by John Wiley. And it outlined the theosophical history of its day. The Theosophical Society threatened a lawsuit. The people that wrote it said, it's all true, my friends. And John Wiley kept the book in print. The history of the Theosophical movement over the last 100 years reflects the history of human nature. Very turbulent, very difficult, and also very exciting as you see people trying to find their way in what's really a very different approach to life. But the Theosophical Society and the United Lodge of Theosophists are, I would say, on friendly terms. There's a great deal in the TS of going back and studying the original writings and an acknowledgement that ULT came into existence to keep these books in print and to see if they were studied.
let's just, I want to leave time for Professor, I just want to bring us home to the last point we talked about. And the last thing we talked about was the notion that the ULT does a very good job of getting people into the rhythm of studying canonical texts. You study, you know, as one Saint Nathan goes to Jerusalem and studies the Torah before in order to become a Hasid. But the notion, or the Buddhists, they're Tibetan Buddhists, we've talked about this. This is the notion that you go through the process, and that's what I like about going to Gita class. Bhagavad Gita classes, every week you show up. It takes about like 9 months to get through the 16 books of the Bhagavad Gita, and it took you, what, about 10 years to get through the Secret Doctrine, of 11 years to get through a weekly class where every week you talked about a chronological section. So do you just want to wrap up the notion of going down this path of studying these documents, which I think is really why I had you come here.
Thank you. You can come to the meetings and never open a book. You can come to a meeting once every 10 years. It doesn't matter to us. Whenever you get there, you're there. However, the structure of the meetings is what we do is we study the texts. And when that's all you do, you can do it in a lot of different ways. You can read the Secret Doctrine, which is a 2-volume, vast, deep, complicated book. It is not linear, and it's very daunting. You can read it through linearly, as we have just finished after 11 years. You can read it through topically. You can pick it up and just open it up and read whatever comes to mind. You can have great fun with it. But the act, this is, I think, the secret to why we're still here after 100 years. The secret of the study class is, I know what I think. I'm bored with my mind. When I hear what all of you think, that's when it gets to be fun. And the idea that each human being over multiple lifetimes has a mind to use, but it's not at all like anybody else's mind, which is why we come together, why you're all here this morning. That act of study of the text together really illuminates the text. And I think that's part of the reason that the human beings work both separately. You go off to the cave in the monastery or the jungle, but then you come back to the group. And I think that that's really a critical thing. Also comes back to the power of the text. William Q. Judge and H.P. Blavatsky, whether you agree with them or not, were presenting a very specific doctrine and point of view. So there's something to really get your mind and soul into. It's not everything's wonderful, or just, say everything's equal. There's a specific teaching. So you get involved in figuring it out. And I think the human being, that's where the scientist comes from. That's where the great philosopher comes from. That need to really look at what's real and then engage with it. And that's what reading these texts hopefully allows us to do. And also, then you ask questions and always think for yourself.
Questions? Yes, go ahead.
Do you find it limiting at all focusing on canonical stuff? And is there room to build on top of that, instead of developing philosophy as you move forward?
That's a really important question.
Do you want to repeat?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. The question is, do we find it limiting to only look at the canonical texts? After Blavatsky's death, there were a number of people who said, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase here, they said, I have my own Tibetan master who appears to me, and I have new teachings to present. They are called, from a scholarly perspective, the neo-theosophists. In a book called Theosophy or Neo-Theosophy, a Canadian scholar did an in-depth analysis and said, there are different teachings. It's not a matter of a continuation, as these folks claim. There are about 4 or 5 very well-known neo-theosophists. But it's a whole, and if you want to follow them, that's great. But if you want to read the original teachings, they're different. And it's when you start figuring out which attracts you that you find your comfort level. So it's limiting in the sense that you come to a decision about which teaching you think reflects reality. But it's also liberating because you come to a decision about which teaching reflects reality. For example, we study the Bhagavad Gita and Patanjali's Yogi aphorisms. We do it from the perspective of the theosophical view of the world. We acknowledge that there are a bazillion other ways to look at those texts. And it's important to see them within the culture or the framework of their own culture. So we're not, as Westerners, appropriating someone else's religious reality. But having said that, there is a theosophical view. And so admitting that as a foundation, if that's the sort of thing you're interested in, then becomes, as I've said, the purpose of the work.
Does theosophy have any tenets that are antithetical to the Christian doctrine of salvation and grace?
That's
Wow,
a good
that's a
question.
really
It's a great
good
question.
question.
The question is, does theosophy have any doctrines that are antithetical to the saving, the existence of salvation and grace? The theosophical perspective is that the individual essence, call it the soul, call it the monad, is eternal. If you see it from the perspective of religious teaching, you might say a ray of the divine. That ray incarnates over and over again and is responsible for its own actions. As it becomes self-aware, it can then determine the direction of its incarnation. It's not personal, not, oh, I was Cleopatra, or oh, I'm going to be the King of England. Nothing like that. It's an inner journey where the personal nature is not important. So there is no need for salvation because it's a self-determining process. You might think that if salvation is an outside thing with an outside savior, you might think of the savior as one's own higher self, one's own spiritual nature, which is that of the whole. Grace, I think, is again part of our own inner spiritual world, because there's nothing outside of us. The acknowledgement of the power and importance to people of understanding and personalizing these things is real. And so no student of theosophy would ever want to interfere or upset someone whose religious view was really different. And in her first book, Isis Unveiled, Blavatsky actually says she would not want members of any religion to really read the book, because she wouldn't want to upset them.
So being born again could be analogous to opening yourself up to the life force.
Absolutely, yeah. Open yourself up to the life force. You're born over and over again, and that allows you to have an infinite number of experiences. And that's what then allows you to realize your own nature. And you're doing this all together. There's no individual, I'm going to go off and be alone. And I think that's of critical importance.
I think we better wrap it up. So everyone, thank Victoria.
Thank you very much. I think the opportunity to come and hear all this fascinating stuff must be wonderful to do. But thank you very much. I left stuff up here for you. Help yourself.
Thank you. Rich, do you want to, maybe the boys can set up and you can just talk for a couple minutes, or do you just want to jump into it? Do you need any lead time? You're ready to go? Perfect.
The Dominator was March 13th, 1961. Has anyone heard of the Dominator? Okay. It's unusual to me, the story itself of it being dredged up on the rocks on that date, isn't that unusual? It's the aftermath of it that I found really interesting. It was a Greek freighter, a Liberty ship from World War II, and it was on its way from Vancouver to San Pedro. And it simply just got stuck on the rocks at Rocky Point, which is notorious, especially in the winter and the spring, for really bad storms. There's more than one shipwreck there. The Dominator is a shipwreck to this day. You go up and explore the frontal portion of it. And I have with me a dream journal, because that was my playground. I lived near Lenata Bay, and I went down there quite a lot. I would sleep inside of it sometimes. And it's a place in my childhood I've revisited. I've brought people down there, and I've had midnight picnics, a bonfire on top of it, a shadow puppet show inside of it. And I would say about, on average, 7 people die a year off the cliffs, either through accidents or suicides. So there's a lot of sudden death around there, and that leaves impressions. And I've had a lot of interesting experiences in my childhood going down there with ghost activity. And I've spoken to since other people who lived around there who had a lot of odd situations happen. I thought I would show you a little film. And I have with me Paul, who will play theremin, and I have Dan, whose relatives were once crewmen of the Dominator, playing the lap steel guitar. And the Dominator was made out of steel. There was a lot of steel in the Dominator, so that's the lap steel guitar. Here's some of my dreams. Move up closer if you have trouble seeing this. This is June 1978. I noticed large groups of people assembled on the tops of the cliff. Every once in a while, one would jump off laughing, falling slowly, then turning invisible. When I would look for them at the bottom, all I would find were old beer cans filled with millipedes, which would try to crawl up my arm. I heard helicopters above. When I went around the cove's bend to see, I saw that they were attempting to lift the Dominator out of the ocean. The crowd of people overlooking this event were oriental and wore black jumpsuits with green trim. I asked a tall man wearing a wide hat made of straw what was going on. He laughed and asked me if I knew what all the rocks and boulders on the ground were for. The Chinese man handed me a gross, multicolored lollipop with Mickey Mouse in the center. In my country, he told me, we make these. I was then on the rustic deck of the Dominator. It was airborne, stringed up like a doll with helicopters. I watched the coastline become smaller and smaller. The ship was attached to many helicopters by thick silver cables. They were taking the ship to marine land. It was to be placed in an aquarium as decoration and for a place that would house and protect giant squid. Parts of the Dominator were falling into the ocean. I became greatly alarmed that I couldn't swim very well. I was 300 feet above the ocean. I began to see cobwebs quickly grow from the inside of the ship before I looked up. End of the first dream. the cliff with all my strength, but I keep sliding down regardless. All I have to cling on to is roots and mud. The more effort I put into going back up, the quicker I start to slide down. I see gigantic waves battering against the sides of the cliff as the sea rises. Rocky Point's cliffs collapse and fall into the ocean, covering up the Dominator, which I find myself trapped in all at once. Mud and lobster shells fall into my face. The rusted ship grows smaller around my body. I have trouble breathing when the ruins of the ship become my shell. I am sent off by it to fight a panther, probably a black panther. Now is the day when there is no rain, only red steaming dust. I wake up thinking I'm dead for 2 minutes. March 1980. Many people crowd my room. They're wearing doctor smocks, aprons, and masks. They continue to bring in pieces of rusted up metal with particles attached. Somehow, they expect me to fix these scraps of heavy, awkward pieces of metal, attach them back together somehow. I was their leader, but I didn't know for what purpose among all the chaos. I kept trying to explain that the garage was locked, but they wouldn't listen. Instead, they woke up the neighbors and made a mess of the kitchen by throwing large pieces of rust into the sink. I was trying to tell them we had no food, but I became suspicious of them as they turned into policemen with sea-drenched, foamy faces. June 4th, 1981. I'm aboard the front deck of the ship, which is slanted. Half of the ship is sunk out of the ocean somewhere on the bottom. I'm having a loud argument with my grandfather, a bullish, stout man. All around the rocks at the bottom of the cliff are starved, ratty-looking cats. They have strange, fin-like appendages growing out of their backs. Some cats have more than one tail. I feel bad and wish to feed them, but I have nothing. My grandfather wants them killed and thrown out to the sea for some reason. He won't rebuild. The dream becomes too confusing and fractured to detail in any sort of way at this point. My grandfather holds up a burlap bag filled with lettuce. October 28, 1981. I'm in my room at night, staring out the window, like staring into a large black aquarium in which objects float in and out of focus. I see fish, leaves, newspapers, seaweed, and body parts filled with holes. This man wearing a hideous dog mask was staring at me on the other side of the window. He had slowly come into focus. After a while, he walks to the middle of the driveway and starts to wave his arms about. He is wearing a cheap children's angel costume. Too large for his small body, he is still waving. At this point, I wake up and then drift back to sleep again. I follow the man outside. He walks up the street towards Lunada Bay, taking side alley shortcuts I don't remember. When I reach the cliffs, he's gone. There's balls of tinfoil upon the ground. They have many pins stuck to them and vibrate rapidly. As I pick one up, I start to notice all these house pets everywhere. Many are going down the cliffs along the foot trails. owl-like creatures. Some animals are missing limbs and painfully drag themselves along the ground. I'm amazed by it all, but also apprehensive, since I feel as if I'm witnessing some event I wasn't invited to. November 22nd, 1983. I'm popping one of those seaweed bubbles that are below the leafy segment. As I do this enjoyable pastime, I notice my fingers dripping blood into my lap. This is because there are sharp glass splinters inside each bowl. Pain, or whatever I believe to be pain, is climbing up my arm. I'm worried that by the time it goes to my heart, I'll be dead, and my body will look like shattered glass. I'm looking out, and the Dominator is on fire. I'm looking out, and the Dominator is on fire. It's all in flames. The suit flies through like manna. December 7th, 1983. I live inside the Dominator with a family of homeless Peruvians. They are small, about between 4 and 5 feet. They know very little English. Somehow I come to understand that the relatives made the steel, which was used in the construction of the Dominator. Many of them had died in the steel mill. They must now sit and wait for those to come and salvage the remains of their ship. I ask why this is important. He hands me a rock and tells me to throw it at the side of the ship. I do. A massive skunks run out. A whole bunch of them. Skunks. They all start running out of the Dominator. A large crowd of people I hadn't noticed before. Right towards the fleeing skunks with spears and rifles. A massacre occurs. I can do nothing to stop this. I'm back inside the ship with the family. They're trying to assemble some sort of satellite dish. I remember, incorrectly, but keep ending up stuck lodged between crevices and the jagged rocks. I have one more dream, but I won't read it because it's the last. I'd like to thank Paul on the theremin, Dan, and Stu. I had a little bit of trouble with the theremin because, as you know, the Dominator is made of a lot of metal, and its influence was coming off of the screen, tampering with the antenna, I believe. Any questions?
When did the ship crash?
March 13th, 1961. A couple of weeks before the Bay of Pigs happened, and 2 years before JFK was assassinated, and the end of democracy in America.
But do you have an explanation why you disinfiltrated your dreams?
Well, I used to sleep on it. It was near where I lived. I think there's a power. You can hear me without this, right? Yeah. I hate microphones. I shouldn't give you the microphone. Certain places have powers, and some places are universal. Everyone taps into it. Other places are more personal. Maybe with the Dominator, for me, it's more personable. I think the power of it entering my dreams is that I came from a fucked up family. So that, you look for places to hide and get away from the chaos zones. and I think that had something to do with it. Plus, it's haunted. I mean, that whole area of the cliff, at night it's weird. It changes. The feeling of it changes. Yeah.
Is it still possible to get down and walk around on the Dominator? Is it still there?
Yes, but I don't know how much. I haven't been there in about 5 years. I'm sure the frontal portion of it is still up. It's like a big metal tent. You could go inside of that. You could also go on the top of the tent. It's relatively flat, and there's like a anchor that you can slide right down that. It's a lot of fun, but don't get stuck. And also nearby, there's a 3-terrace patio. It's really beautiful. At the very top, there's even a little grave site for someone's dog. But that's public property, actually.
Where is it?
Rocky Point is in between Redondo Beach and Long Beach. It's in Palos Verdes, but not a day. So that's Palos Verdes Estates. And there's access. Whenever you see a blue sign with a trident, that means there's a footpath. That's a great place to go, especially late at night. And don't fish, though. The fish is bad. And don't eat it in the apple. It's probably something I might want to add, I forgot. When the Dominator crashed, that in itself wasn't that interesting, but there was a hex curse, and it was in the newspapers. A lot of people died from really weird accidents. One example, about 10 years after, about like 71, 72, a guy was on a boat and got stuck on a portion of the Dominator a foot below the ocean, and he went right off the deck of his boat and cracked his head on the Dominator, which was underwater. And there's a lot of scuba diving accidents. I mean, first of all, it's rough water. It's very uncomfortable, especially in the winter. There's rather cloudy. And you get a lot of rip currents. And it's just one great big metal collection of rooms. So people get stuck in the room sometimes and run out of oxygen, and they get stuck in the rip tides. I've also seen little boats like crash into the Dominator on the rocks, and it looks like the Dominator is actually eating it. I kind of like it. It was carrying meat and wheat, two things that rhyme, and that smell really bad when they rot. And they couldn't salvage that. The water got into the bowl, it got into the meat and wheat, it expanded, and the Dominator was 2 ships instead of 1. So it was a total loss to the crew who didn't want to leave the ship because they thought if they did, America would claim it. All that brought in wheat and wheat belonged to America, resources. But they got convinced that they would be reimbursed. And it brought flies, or swarms of flies. And people wanted to get rid of the Dominator. But it brought lobsters, lots of lobsters. So people came from out of state all the way from Maine to go there to get these lobsters. But it also brought starfish, and they did a lot of havoc and destruction to the what little reefs there were. Meaning, like, kind of threw things out of balance. So scientists, biologists came down. They weren't real biologists. They were helping them out. And they cut the starfish in half and they threw them back in the ocean. But it didn't help. Just multiply the problem. There was a problem with peeping toms because so many people were coming down that in the 60s, pretty much, when it was still a new ruin, there was a lot of reports of like people sneaking around people's backyards looking for their windows. I have here more information. That's free. I have cassettes. If you would like to experience the sounds of the Dominator, I went down there and collected sounds and made a soundtrack on a 4-track. I also have glow-in-the-dark silk screens and other silk screens of the Dominator. So you can have a full-fledged
Dominated by the
experience. Yeah. And go there to worship and pay respect. Any other questions? No?
up a cup of tea, and I think Nathan, you're supposed to. We're going to get started. Victoria and I are going to introduce your talk. So you're at. Everyone come back in 10 minutes. We're gonna take a little break. Victoria and I are gonna talk about, we mentioned several times this notion of the return of impressions, which is a theosophical notion, and we're gonna talk about how civilization is passed down in souls, not in buildings or records. And we're gonna talk about that because this will segue nicely, Nathan, into your talk about
I think so.
old buildings and history and simulacra. So perfect. So, Rich, you're here to answer if people want to come and look at stuff. And Victoria is just finishing up a cup of tea. She left some stuff up here. So if people want to come back in maybe 10 minutes, we'll get started on Nathan's lecture, which if you're not signed up, then we'll also start looking at no-shows for the walking tour. We want to get on the walking tour, and there's some cancellations. We can see that.